Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan Reisman from the Education and Public Relations Office of Himalaya Herbal Healthcare, and I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of the Himalaya Hour, which is our monthly phone training series. Every month, on the second Tuesday of the month, we take a close-up look at some different products and topics from the Himalaya Herbal Healthcare line. Today, we've got a great show for you. Body Shop 101, Making Muscles and Learning How to Keep Them. An inside look into the lives of competitive athletes and how their supplements support them. We're going to talk today about liver care and ashwagandha and Chyawanprash and Garcinia and our You Need It Balm. So your phones are on mute right now. If you just joined us, you can mute your phones by punching *6 on your phones, and that'll keep your background noise to a minimum as we do the show for you today. Also, stay on the line until the very end of the call for special instructions on how you can register to win this month's free fill giveaway for your store about all the products we're going to talk about in this month's program. So you can win some free fill of liver care and ashwagandha, Chyawanprash, Garcinia, and You Need It Balm. We will give you instructions on how to do that at the end of the program. We're coming to you live from Las Vegas today and Houston, Texas, and Toronto, Ontario. We've got a great show for you, and we have two guests, Omar Cruz, who all of you know already as our national educator and clinical herbalist from Himalaya Herbal Healthcare, and we also have from Peak Performance Products in Canada, our partner in Canada, David Whalen, who is joining us and going to talk about not only the supplements that we're discussing today, but his career as a competitive athlete and a bodybuilder as well. So, making muscles and learning how to keep them. Omar, you and I are both fortunate. We've had the opportunity on several training trips and some trade shows outside of the U.S. to work with our next guest, David Whalen from Peak Performance Products. That's Himalaya's exclusive distributor in Canada. How are you doing, David?
I am doing well, gentlemen. Welcome.
We thought we'd drag you into the show today.
It's great to be aboard.
See what the Canadian contingent can tell us about supplements today. David, since you're a brand new guest on the Himalaya Hour, why don't you tell us a little bit about your career not only at Peak Performance Products, but also your experience as a competitive athlete. Let us know how you got involved in the industry and what you do for a living and what sports you participate in, and how did you come to be involved in the world of supplements and athletics?
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for having us aboard here. I mean, in terms of myself, I had the great opportunity. Both my parents have had me involved in athletics and sports for the most part of my life. And I was always interested in health and nutrition. Took me into studying dietetics in university for schooling, and eventually working for Peak Performance. I've been here for the most part of 8 years, and it's been a bit of a journey through working right out on the road as a sales rep to helping nationally to doing some marketing and education. It's been great. In terms of athletics, I've done everything from competitive track to bodybuilding. I played some competitive hockey, still do, and I also competed in a bit of boxing as well.
All right. If you just joined us, folks, please push *6 on your phones to mute your phones and keep our background noise to a minimum. Thank you very much. And if you joined us late, welcome to our Himalaya Hour. I'm Ryan Reisman from the Education Department at Himalaya, and we have two guests with us today, David Whalen, who you just heard in Toronto, and Omar Cruz from Sugar Land, Texas. How you doing, Omar?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Hey, Omar, tell us about our muscles, since that's what we're talking about today. Where do they come from? And you and I know David, and you and I look like the before picture in the comic book ads of muscle building, and David looks like the after picture. We're Bruce Banner, and he's the Incredible Hulk. Tell us where our muscles come from, and why do you and I look this way, and why does David look so much different?
I think bad luck is the first answer for that one, quite frankly.
I think you're right.
We got the short end of the genetic DNA, quite frankly. But no, I think obviously David's physique is a response to his performance and a response to his dedication to what he does. And I was joking yesterday with some of the staff. I said my body was built for research. It was built to sit down and read things and type on computers.
You and me both.
and that's what that's where I put my time and effort in, and that's certainly what he's done his time and his effort, and it shows, very, very, very obviously how it shows. But it gives us an example to really take another approach to appreciate the human system, and muscles in particular can really be, the border between our physical self and the environment that we live in. And if you think about it more clearly, the muscles are there to adapt to our environment and to adapt to the needs of survival. And so if we take those two concepts, adaptation to our environment, in other words, what is it that our body does in the environment, and what are the restrictions, what are the hesitations, what are the implications of gravity, as well as even our dietary influences? How does that help the body shape itself? And how does it survive in terms of its environment from predators, from prey, or even from the climature in of itself? So let's take, for example, a gorilla as a great example of looking at the musculature of a mammal and how it responded to its environment. As we all know, gorillas spend much of the time in the air. They spend a lot of time in trees. They forest, obviously, through vegetation. So primarily, their strength needs to be in their upper body. If you look at a gorilla's shape and size, you'll see these very diminutive legs and this massive torso with these very elongated arms and very, very well-defined pectoral muscles. And those are all there to help its efforts to lift itself and to move itself from tree to tree, branch to branch, and use these arms and these hands as a method tool for gathering food. So if you want to look at the other end of the spectrum, you can look at a horse, for example. We all know horses to be a great example of strength and vigor. We've talked about it a lot with ashwagandha. That's where the term ashwagandha comes from the horse itself. And the horses are known for their lower body strength. They're known for their legs, their ability to push themselves, the force and the equation of thrust that is so well timed and calculated in their lower body strength. Each one of these mammals represents a strength and a weakness. So we talked about the gorilla's weaknesses in the legs, but they have great strength in the arms and the chest. The strength of course, the horse is its legs. Its weakness would be the upper body. And for the horse, because of its positioning, the weakest part of the horse, for many of you who know have owned horses or worked with horses, is the loin, which is kind of, superior to the hip. So the lower back, essentially, is their weakest point. To illustrate that, for example, the mass that you use with a horse. So a horse can carry 20% of its body weight. So if a horse is 1,000 pounds, its carrying capacity is 200 pounds. However, the ability for it to pull, in other words, how much weight can it pull behind it, is 4 times that number. And that gives us an idea that the environment that it lives in will predetermine the shape of its body and the strength and weaknesses that it can display. Now, what we have with the human body is a little different because of our upright structure, because of our relative availability to food. The need for muscle development is going to be largely predetermined by how much effort we challenge the human body, which is why folks like David Whalen, for example, spend so much time in an environment of a gym, for example, which I missed working out this morning, which makes it 7 years in a row. I'm really worried that I'm worried that it's a habit now. But he spends so much time in the environment to challenge the body, to raise itself, to perform at the challenges that the environment is having. So that's kind of an idea of what the muscles do. They help us adapt to our needs of the environment and survival in terms of defending ourselves.
Let's go back to David. David Whalen is our competitive athlete and Canadian national educator for our exclusive distributor, Himalaya's exclusive distributor in Canada, Peak Performance Products. David, you've been bodybuilding for how many years now?
Almost 20 years.
Okay, 20 years. And when you started, what goal did you have in mind? Were you just looking to get into better physical shape in general, or did you have a very specific build and physique in mind?
I'd like to say athletics, but potentially trying to get a date, Ryan.
Okay.
That explains a lot.
well, you just got married and had a baby, so it must have worked, right?
It's I'm trying to keep maintaining it now so she doesn't get rid of me.
No, but when you started, was it just to get into good physical shape, or were you really trying to have that bodybuilder physique?
I think for the most part, obviously growing up in sports and athletics, wanting to excel at every angle that you can. Again, my constitution tends to be, Pitta type or a type A. Always striving to be better. Maybe even a little bit of the ego, wanting to be the best. It's definitely being in the gym and pushing yourself has definitely been a benefit to that aspect.
I wish we could just magically send you all a picture through your phone so you can see. I think maybe on some of the e-blasts and flyers that went out, we had some competition photos of David. But is that body shape, is that physique hard to maintain for you?
Yeah, I've always been quite fit, but I think, in all honesty, again, I've been active. I play competitive hockey twice a week still. I'm in the gym every day for, an hour to 2 hours. I try to maintain a healthy diet and incorporate, a number of different supplements. So I would say, compared to the average, it takes work. It takes effort, like anything.
Okay. Well, and speaking of supplements, that's a nice segue because we wanted to talk about Liver Care as one of the products we featured in this program today. Because here's an interesting thing that I see. I mean, we know Liver Care in the supplement world as just a good all-around liver support, and it's a good product for people to be taking on a daily basis. But I notice that I don't just see it in our health food stores. I don't just see it in our supplement stores. When I look in stores that cater primarily to bodybuilders, to athletic people, when I look in those sports-oriented stores, I always see Liver Care as a product that's strongly featured out of our line. So let me ask you both the same question and see where it leads us. So Omar, let me throw it back to you. Tell us about the liver's role in exercise and metabolism and athletic performance. Why would the liver be an organ that we need to be concerned about if we're working out or if we're competing?
The liver makes the metabolic process complete in the sense that if you were to go to an athletic store, like an athletic supplement-focused store, you'll see a bevy of nutritional supplements, including a lot of precursors for hormones, for example, or even energizers. All of those things to enhance their state of performance. And when you think of that, if you think of just that word performance from a biological point of view, nutrition becomes ultimately important to consider. The organ that converts all of the products that you consume into living nutrition is the liver. It is the ultimate in metabolic transformation. So take, for example, all of the supplements that you're taking, that we focus a lot on in terms of bioavailability. And we talk about bioavailability as if it begins and ends in the intestines and the stomach. It really doesn't. All of that blood flow that's moving away from the intestines and the stomach filters through the liver. And the liver then goes through its process of conjugation, of biotransformation, literally, of converting these nutrients into usable forms. So let's take, for example, protein. Different proteins are assembled from different, ratios or combinations of these amino acids. And these proteins, in and of themselves, are fairly useless. It's the amino acids that the body needs to get so that it can then recreate human proteins. And that's what's really the bigger factor. If we were to consume chicken protein and it comes in and, gets into our blood supply as a protein in and of itself, that would be actually a problem. Our digestive system, our liver, is there to break apart these proteins into their raw ingredients and then reassemble them to make our skeletal muscles, to recreate these cardiac muscles, to recreate the muscles that are, again, made out of the raw ingredients of protein, but without the liver and without the digestive system, you won't have that potential for animation.
And David, same question to you basically. I've worked with you in Canada numerous times, and we've been into these muscle shops, and you're always talking about liver care when you go in there. So as somebody who's in the gym all the time, somebody who has competed professionally, somebody who's around other bodybuilders and athletes a lot, what are these guys doing that's hard on their liver, and why should they be paying extra attention to their liver?
I think as an athlete, obviously people are looking for the extreme, for new supplements. We're looking for new options. We're looking for things to, add and improve. What you do find in maybe some of the language that would work for some of the athletes is that, people are looking to maintain hormone levels, looking to, rid free radicals. There's a lot of processes, obviously, that the liver is responsible for.
Hold on just a second, David. We've got some background noise. Folks, if you haven't muted your phones, could you do so by pushing *6 on your phones? If you could do that, that would help us keep the background noise down. Sorry, we've got kind of a mass of phone lines today to get everybody on the phone. I think somebody's put us on speakerphone and is talking in the background. If you could push *6. Okay, well, we'll keep going and see what we can do here. So there we go. And on that note, we'll jump into liver care in just a second. Before we do that, though, and David, I'll let you pick up where you left off when we come back. Before we do that, I wanted to thank everybody who tuned into last month's call and congratulate a couple of our winners. Tara's from Whole Foods in Austin, Texas, and Bernadette from another Whole Foods market store in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Both of them were on the program last month. They called in at the end, won some great free fill for their stores. We'll be giving away all of the products we talk about today. We'll be giving away all of those products at the end of the show. Your chance to win coming up. To order Himalaya products, call 800-869-4640 in the U.S. and talk to our great customer care team. That's 800-869-4640 in the U.S. And in Canada, call 877-833-7325. That's 877-833-7325 in Canada. Be sure to visit us online at HimalayaUSA.com for product information, history, science, and come and like us on Facebook, too. Facebook.com/HimalayaUSA. All right, so let's get back to liver care, guys. Reminding you, if you just joined us, please push *6 on your phones. That mutes your phone and keeps the background noise to a minimum. Omar, let's talk about liver care. Before we go back to David and tie it more into athletic performance and support in particular, could you just give us a basic overview of the liver care formula and how we typically see it used?
Well, the liver in terms of Ayurveda, which is how we base our formulation concept and theory, is that it is the point at which we can identify the conversion, the transformation of nutrition. So in terms of Ayurveda, we formulate to support the organ whose job it can include over 500 functions. So when we look at the plants and the herbs that you see in liver care, you'll be a little bit surprised, I think. And many times people will ask me, I've never seen these herbs before. Even though they have 3,000 to 5,000 years worth of use, they still maybe seem very new to the West. But if you were to break this down, this formula, what it does is it increases the livelihood of the liver cells to survive and sustain themselves. These hepatocytes, which are what these liver cells are actually called, perform these 500 functions on a day-to-day basis. And they do it day in and day out, 24 hours a day. In fact, about a pint of blood will filter through the liver every minute and a half. And so it's constantly at work. The big concept in Ayurveda is that herbs cannot heal anyone. They can only remind the body how to heal itself. And so in Ayurveda, you look for plants that promote the survivability, the wisdom, and the innate knowledge within these cells. This particular formula began back in 1955, and in and of itself is dispensed every quarter of a second somewhere on the planet. So this wisdom of formulating to support the function of the herb or of the organ itself is obviously quite successful. In fact, these herbs that are included in this particular formula have been subject to over 200 human clinical trials by Himalaya alone. So they have dramatic amount of evidence that support and document this type of synergy. And to kind of give a better, more finite idea of what this means, when you do a clinical trial to test the study and the survivability of these hepatocytes, what you look for are the things that happen that fall into the blood supply that should be inside of these hepatocytes. By looking for those raw ingredients, you can determine how many of these hepatocytes are actually dying, degrading, or literally decomposing and exploding and falling into the blood supply. See, what we are measuring with what's called a liver function test is you're looking for the raw ingredients that make up these liver cells. And in our clinical trials, we've seen dramatic drop in these liver enzyme counts. And by looking for these enzymes that are normally inside of these cells, we can measure how many cells are actually staying alive in order to operate in these 500 functions versus degrading or dying off and henceforth reducing the capacity of the liver to perform its job.
David, back to what you were saying earlier, David Whalen in Toronto. You have been personally taking liver care for as many years as I've known you now, and in addition to what Omar was saying, is there any particular reason that you find liver care an important product for athletes and bodybuilders to be using on a regular basis?
I think, if I look back to when I started working out almost 20 years ago, I would travel, maybe hit the store and pick up, $300 in supplements, and, we're always looking for something cutting edge, something new. Really, we're filling our body with all of these chemicals and supplements, and trying to accomplish something that's an extreme. It's not necessarily normal for the body to be at such a low body fat level. And all of these supplements, these things that we're taking, were stimulants, whichever the case may be. We don't think about our health, post workout. We don't think about what we're doing to our body, and it wasn't until this journey through natural health and obviously becoming familiar with liver care that I really started to think about what am I doing to give back to my body. I'm forcing my system every day to perform an extreme. What am I doing to give back? And I think that's where a product like Liver Care comes into play. Your liver is responsible for so much in your body, and we take it for granted sometimes. So definitely Liver Care is a supplement that I recommend to family and friends, and it's a staple definitely in my diet.
I usually ask this question to Omar, but since I've got you in the hot seat, I'll give Omar a month off since he's answered this a million different ways for me already. But what makes Liver Care unique, David? If you were a store manager or a store employee, why would you recommend Liver Care in particular over any other liver supplement? I mean, there's got to be dozens of them. Why would you say, hey, take Liver Care instead?
Ryan, I think we're obviously somewhat biased, and I know that we've traveled a lot in Canada, and this question comes up. But I think what really makes Liver Care stand out, and realistically Himalaya in general, is these are products that are clinically proven in human clinical trials. We're not talking about petri dishes or animal studies. We're talking about a finished product here that's been around since 1955. Right now we can look at Liver Care and say, hey, you take that one capsule twice a day, and you take it before meals. We know all that based on the research. We're not guessing. We're not trying to prescribe in the store. The real unique part about Liver Care is that people don't have to ask. One thing that Omar has said in past is the natural health industry is trying to provide hope, and people want to take a product that they can say works or that they can have belief in. And I truly feel as though Liver Care and a lot of the Himalaya supplements provide that. We don't have to ask, what dosage should I take, or maybe I'm a smaller person, whichever the case may be. What I really like about the Liver Care product is the dosage is on the bottle. They provide the support, and the research is there to prove its effectiveness for the last 55 plus years.
Excellent. Folks, if you have any questions for Omar Cruz or for David Whalen, send them in via email. Email them to Omar, ocruz@himalayausa.com. C-R-U-Z is how you spell his last name, ocruz@himalayausa.com. Whether it's a question for Omar or for David, email them to Omar. We'll forward those questions to David if they apply to David, and we'll get you some answers in via email after the show. Omar, let's move on to our next product out of the Himalaya Pure Herbs line. We've talked about Liver Care. Here's another product now that I see in a lot of in the muscle shops and the bodybuilding sections. It's an herb called ashwagandha, and you and I have certainly talked about this herb lots of time in relation to shows on stress and energy like last month. We talk about it frequently. It's really one of our Himalaya superstar products. So quick recap for us. You were talking about it earlier, reflecting the strength of a horse, but what does ashwagandha do, and who might be interested in a product like this?
The kind of the fastest way to remember ashwagandha, originally in Sanskrit it means the smell of a horse. Unfortunately, they didn't have marketing departments back then. So nowadays we think about it in terms of what it relates to the body. And if I were to sum it up in an acronym, it would probably sound like energy. And that's primarily how and why we see its use as well as its popularity today. If you look at each of those individual terms in energy, or each of those individual letters in energy, you'll kind of review the body, the endocrine system, which is primarily, how we see its effectiveness in the human system. We know it has a positive effect on the adrenal glands as far as their production and their feedback mechanisms to reduce the production of cortisol. So we know it has a very replenishing and kind of sustaining effect to the adrenal glands, as well as its effects on the thyroid as far as helping the conversion of that stored form of thyroid hormone T4 into the active and the metabolically enhanced T3. And that's a fantastic effort. It actually does so in mechanisms that aren't completely understood, but we think it might have an effect on the intracellular enzymes that convert that T4 into T3. It's a very important aspect of its function, as far as energy goes. What I tend to run into a lot of people who are either trying to increase their performance activity or simply trying to lose weight, for example, or just trying to get through a very deleterious time or a very demanding time as far as work goes, is what you'll see is they'll go to the gym, they'll start working out, and after about maybe a 2 to 3 week period, they'll kind of get into this slump where their body is kind of doing that game where you play chicken with somebody else and see who's going to flinch first. And that's literally what's happening with their endocrine system. We're challenging it to rise up to the occasion, and it's saying, really, we're going to do this forever? And the way it compromises with us is not necessarily budging on terms of how much energy it's going to try and make available, or, more importantly, for the conversation of diet, how much stored energy it's going to try and create and convert into energy for the body in terms of fat. And so what you'll see in these people is they'll get to this 2 or 3 week period where all of a sudden their body feels really exhausted, their appetite is starting to become ravishing, and they're craving a lot of simple foods. The other day I was talking to someone who just started a regime, a really intensive workout regime, and it was funny enough is when they came home from the gym, they immediately went for the ice cream. And, I chuckled about it because it's a very sympathetic position. We've all done that, where you kind of increase your demand and the body says, hey, if we're going to be doing this, we're going to need to add a lot of sugar to that, versus what we're trying to get it to do, which is utilize a lot of the stored form of energy in the terms of fat and use that as a source of vitality. And that's where something like ashwagandha can play into effect. The second letter, which I won't go through all of them, obviously, hopefully we'll do another talk about it, is the nervous system. And that's the other thing that ashwagandha does quite well, is help promote that relaxed environment and that communication within our muscles so that we don't carry a lot of the stress that comes from working out that will lead us towards injury. So really making sure that it protects the nervous system as well as the endocrine system. It's probably two of its really nice accolades to that particular plant. And it's why it's such a high demand adaptogenic herb in our industry.
I know you don't have time to give us the full acronym in detail, but just give us the key words, because ashwagandha, the acronym is energy. The first E is endocrine system. The N is nervous system. What's the second E, just briefly?
The second E, I go for energy again, in the sense that endocrine system is hormonal production in and of itself, but also in terms of just sheer energy. Because a lot of times people will come and they say, what do you got for energy? And that's quite possibly the worst question I ever got in a health food store setting, because there's so many answers, to that kind of situation. And it's a really great go-to herb for that direction. Of course, you should ask them about their sleeping habits. You should ask them about their digestion. There's so many things to think about. But in the short term, they would like to do something that doesn't involve a stimulant, that doesn't involve caffeine, and that's where ashwagandha comes in, quite helpful. The R stands for the reproductive cycle, because we use ashwagandha a lot in terms of regulating cycles and promoting normal menstrual cycles, but also reproductibility in terms of males. We use it a lot when it comes to performance, when it comes to libido, because libido is very sensitive to stress, whether it's emotional or physical stress. Both of them will have an effect on the reproductibility and the systems that relate to libido. Okay. The G for gastrointestinal effectiveness. That's a really, really important part of its function, as far as we use it in ashwagandha and specifically for Ayurveda to kind of kindle the digestive fire, to warm the intestines so that we don't end up with this cold kind of constitution that's very dry and very sensitive to a lot of dietary influences. And the Y stands for youthfulness, because ashwagandha in Ayurveda is considered a rasayana. That's a term that was used 5,000 years ago that meant a life-extending plant, or a plant that had the potential to really increase vitality in the blood. And they used it in terms of creating this anti-aging device, not in terms of skin or beauty, but more along the term of anti-aging when it comes to our mind and when it comes to the functions of the organs. And I think that's kind of the nice way of remembering this plant.
Beautiful. Good summary. Energy is the key word to remember for ashwagandha. E for endocrine system, N for nervous system, E for energy level, R for reproductive system, G for gastrointestinal system, Y for youthfulness, all covered with ashwagandha. David Whalen in Canada, any thoughts on ashwagandha? Is this a product for athletes or everybody? What do you think?
I would definitely suggest it for everyone. When we're talking about athletes or bodybuilders, you bring up terms like cortisol, stress, you bring up terms like thyroid. These are all areas that are going to impact the amount of body fat that one's going to hold on to. Competitive. We actually have a competitive fitness athlete here, and we've had some conversations about water retention and cortisol levels and balance between estrogen levels and progesterone. Ashwagandha is a great option for all of these things, and if the general person is looking to help manage the adrenal glands, help manage energy levels, stress levels, it's a great option there. And then it's also, something that I would definitely suggest for athletes. It is something that I do take on a regular basis.
David, the next product I wanted to talk about is a food-based product called Chyawanprash, which we've talked a lot about. But before we even get into that, I wanted to bring up food in general and diet in general. When you're competing, David, when you're really trying to put on muscle mass, what's a typical day's diet going to be for you? I've watched you eat, and it's an interesting process when you're in competition mode, because you eat differently. And maybe just kind of explain what your diet is when you're competing.
I think anybody that has any goal in mind in terms of their diet, you're always going to speak about eating every 2 to 3 hours. So that's going to be something that's consistent. Definitely, feeding the body a constant supply, wanting to have those amino acids in the bloodstream. Positive nitrogen balance are terms that come up. In terms of food intake, you're going to see lots of proteins. Depending on what state you're at in your diet, you're going to have different carbohydrate variances. So it may be high if you're looking to put on muscle mass. It may be lower if you're looking to lose body fat. And then you're always looking to make sure that you're getting healthy fats, whether that be from fish or from supplements. Definitely, I think the key there is making sure that you're taking in a wide array of nutrition and eating consistently throughout the day.
Omar, what happens to our body, either good or bad, when we eat like that?
I think it depends on the person, and what David was mentioning too, as far as the demands are going to be very unique. I'm sure if you got a dozen bodybuilders in one room, let's give them maybe a garage, and ask them what their diet was like, you'll probably get very similar answers, but there'll be a lot of distinct differences, and each one of them might take in a little bit different. But what I do notice overall is there is at times they may sacrifice fruits and vegetables for making sure they get enough protein or making sure they get enough of those good fats. And so what I sometimes hear, and I'm coming from, more along the lines of prevention than, say, performance, is I would really want to make sure they get enough antioxidants in their diet, and if they can't put those in terms of their diet because of the sugar that generally comes along with antioxidants in our diet, or the simple carbohydrates that come along with our, with the types of antioxidants in our food, I would want to make sure we're supplementing those antioxidants or getting those plant extracts that'll contribute a lot to that antioxidant profile. Keeping in mind that the process of working out and exercising produces a lot of free radicals, and if all we're putting in is fats and proteins for the large part, we miss out on an opportunity to protect those tissues with the diet. So, we go to our very, very ultimate, superfood in the Ayurvedic paradigm, which is Amla. Amla means nurse or mother, and that's a great way of understanding its role in nutrition. And Amla, of course, being the centermost important ingredient in Chyawanprash. So what we see is a diet that needs a tremendous amount of focus on protein and fats, but may be deficient in antioxidants, which is where something like Chyawanprash comes into play.
Well, tell us a little bit of Chyawanprash. Give us some highlights. As you said, amla is an ingredient. It's made of a base of amla fruit. It's a very old combination, and some people call it nature's original superfood. I kind of call it nature's original multivitamin sometimes when I talk about it. Tell us about Chyawanprash. It is not a single thing. It's a recipe, correct?
Yeah, definitely. It's been around for so long, a lot of people, even including ourselves, keep it in our pure herbs line, which is what we would call a single herb line. You'll see Chyawanprash in there, but that tells you how old this formula is. We've seen its written reference up to 5,000 years ago, so we know that it's survived the test of time. And like you mentioned, it really is our multivitamin in Ayurveda. And when you think about it, in terms of our industry, we are constantly trying to make supplements look like food, either by making sure that bioflavonoids are with the vitamin C, or making sure that the ratio of all the B vitamins mimic food, or we're adding bioperin or bioperin to increase absorbability. The large principle behind supplementation and the formulation of supplementation is to make it look like food. The beauty about Chyawanprash is it is a food. It is over 40 ingredients that represent, nuts, seeds, flowers, fruits like amla. It really is made from things that we collect from the soil, and it's processed in a way that really brings out that behavior and bioavailability. If you think of Chyawanprash in terms of how it's used in India, I always like to kid around that it's the Ovaltine of India. It's what everyone grew up with a spoonful of in their mouth. And from that perspective, it is, when you look at it from a global perspective, 50% of all sales when it, in terms of Ayurvedic medicine, whether it's in a clinic, whether it's in a store, in a pharmacy, in Europe, in Asia, in the United States, in Australia, 50% of all those sales are just Chyawanprash. That gives you an idea of how successful and how promoting it is towards nutrition.
And David, I've seen you tear into a jar full of Chyawanprash every now and then. As an athlete, this would be a product that you use in what way?
Again, Ryan, I think as we touched on earlier, athletes are, and the general consumer for that matter, we're always looking for some sort of a stimulant or a pick-me-up or more energy. And we forget the idea behind giving back to the body, which is what I really like about Chyawanprash. As Omar mentioned, it is a multivitamin per se, and it is something that's going to help balance the body. I don't think that we take into account enough taking nutrition, taking supplements that's going to help heal the system, help regulate the system, and Chyawanprash is a great option. As Omar was talking, I was thinking about my grandparents. Omar brought up Ovaltine, but I can recall my grandparents always with cod liver tablets, on the table, and my example is basically that, I think as the generations go on, we don't see our families passing on some sort of nutrition, some sort of value. I almost feel like everyone's as we move forward, we're gravitating to more and more fast foods. Everything's quick and simple. We're not looking to give back, and Chyawanprash is a great option of something that people can take on a daily basis.
I love the versatility of Chyawanprash. It's a wonderful product because it comes in a jar. It's like a jam or a spread. You can, if you want, you can put it on your toast in the morning. You can put it on a bagel. It's shelf stable. Once you open that jar, it can sit right out on the counter. You don't have to refrigerate it. It spreads really well. So you can put it on things, or if I'm feeling snacky in the middle of the day, instead of grabbing a energy bar, going to the vending machine and getting a candy bar, you can just have a big spoonful of Chyawanprash, and it kind of kills that sweet tooth, and it gives you that little energy burst that you need to, when you're feeling sluggish in the afternoon. I love it. The kids love it. I've got hot chocolate junkie kids, and instead I will warm up some almond milk and stir in a couple of spoonfuls of Chyawanprash and put that in cups, and it makes just this delicious nighttime comfort beverage too. It's really a neat product. So that's Chyawanprash from Himalaya Herbal Healthcare. And the last product in the supplement list, we're going to talk about a balm too, but the last supplement product we wanted to talk about today is Garcinia from Himalaya Pure Herbs. Garcinia is on our list, gentlemen. Omar, this is an herb for what?
Garcinia in Ayurveda is used for dietary behavior primarily. They used it a lot for kind of adding back the intelligence of craving the correct foods is what they would generally describe it as. It's very esoteric if we try and describe it in terms of nutrition, because we don't have anything in those kinds of terms. But in Ayurveda, they focused on accessing the memory of the cells to act accordingly with the paradigms of nature. So we use Garcinia when someone is craving the foods that may help them in the short term but may not help them in the long term. And where we've seen modern science validate, that efficacy or that use, is less so on the craving side, but more so on the blood characteristics of the lipid profiles. If you look at a lot of the studies on Garcinia, they focus a lot on weight loss, but I think I almost feel like that's a side effect of getting the body back into a healthy nutritional state. What we see is the liver, by and large, is producing far less of these LDL, these really problematic cholesterols, and producing more of the HDLs, the healthier cholesterols, the type that usher out the LDLs. So what we're starting to see is this moving away from the accumulating forms of cholesterol and improving the profile of our cardiovascular system. Now, from a kind of a more of a broader way of describing that is that it's changing the way the body is utilizing, creating, and removing fats. And when you look at that in comparison to the clinical trials that we've done on our Garcinia, it then makes more sense why we would see that dietary change in the anomaly. In fact, one of the clinical trials I'm looking at, in particular with Garcinia, with our Garcinia product, along with BMI, on a 4-month study, we saw BMIs drop on average 11 points, plus or minus 4.6, whereas the placebo group only dropped 5, plus or minus 2, in the same 4-month period of time. So this anomaly, this change in the metabolic transition of fat, really does seem to be extending even further into how the body utilizes fat as a form of energy versus as a storage potential for long-term energy.
David, where would Garcinia be useful for somebody who's concerned about improving their health from a physical or athletic or appearance standpoint?
Ryan, I think anytime you talk to people about body fat levels, you're definitely going to be having a conversation about Garcinia. A lot of the stimulant products or fat burners, if you want to call them that, will contain this ingredient in them, and I think that's when people will most likely gravitate to an ingredient like this.
And last up, gentlemen, I wanted to talk about one of our personal care products from our personal care line. It's called You Need It Balm, K-N-E-A-D, You Need It Balm. David, I would imagine that when you do what you do, your muscles get sore. Is there a difference in the pain level? I mean, I would imagine if you were in the gym a couple hours every day, you're sore almost all the time. But are there times when you go, wow, that's sore even for me, and now I've really done something?
I think one of the weirdest parts among bodybuilders and weight trainers is we almost strive to feel uncomfortable, to feel the sore, the pain. It's almost like a competition to come to work the next day and say, I had a great workout, I can't sit. Training legs, having difficulty going from a seated position to a standing position is in some ways looked as a good thing. Having the inability to wash your hair because your triceps are too sore. It can get quite interesting.
And then out of the topicals that you use when your muscles are that sore, how would you rate You Need It Balm?
It's a great option. You Need It Balm is great for the muscles. It's a warming or heating type balm. I think the part that I like about it the most is that, obviously growing up, I've used a lot of the other chemical type products that were out on the market that you can buy at your local drugstores. My parents would have had in their cabinets. The nice part about You Need It Balm is it's actually USDA certified organic. It's all natural. I know what I'm putting on my skin, and even going back to your liver, we don't really realize that all these chemicals that you put on your skin are eventually going to get into your bloodstream. Knowing that a product like You Need It Balm, isn't going to be polluting my body is definitely something that I would include. For anybody that's looking to deal with massage or sore muscles, anything like that.
Yeah. Here's a tip for you for store managers or our demo people who want to discuss You Need It Balm. All you got to do is put that on your supplement counter or on your demo table and open the lid. It smells wonderful. It has this eucalyptus-y, lemony smell, and people will, from the next aisle, they will come over to see what smells so good. Just leave that lid off for a couple of minutes and let people enjoy the scent of that. And let them put it on their wrist or on their arm, and they can feel that warming effect right away. It's an easy product to passively demo just by opening a jar and letting people enjoy how it feels. So before we finish up with a couple of last questions, let me remind you that next month on the Himalaya Hour, we have an interesting show. Since we're talking about sore muscles here, let's kind of segue into a show on joints and bones and connective tissues next month. We're going to call the show Joint Custody, taking control of your bones and your joints, integrating the wisdom of Ayurveda with a contemporary understanding of osteo and joint health. We'll feature our products Joint Care, Osteocare, Boswellia, and Turmeric. Four of the products we'll be talking about on Tuesday, August 14th, same times, 11 and 3 Central Time, same phone number, next month on the Himalaya Hour. Last question for Omar Cruz in Sugar Land, Texas today. Omar, if we want to get in better physical shape, if anybody wants to be in better shape, perhaps non-athletic like you and me, somebody who's looking at David Whalen's competition pictures there thinking, well, I'm probably never going to look like that, but something to shoot for. You know, what do you and I do if we want to look a little less like Bruce Banner and a little more like the Incredible Hulk?
I think two things. We do radio interviews instead of in-person views, and we do Photoshop.
Yeah, right, got that one already.
I think those two things we can really, as long as we stay on this format, I think we're going to be okay. No, I think seriously, the concept is to find the form of exercise that brings you joy. And I think that will be the one that's the most healthiest and the most enjoyable. Because keep in mind that our time is very precious, obviously, and if we're doing an exercise that doesn't bring us joy, but rather just kind of pushes us towards something, some kind of archetype that we would like to become, those are the hardest habits to really form. And so I would try and find one that is supportive of our happiness and joy. The second thing I would suggest is do exercises that our elders can do, because the best exercise is the one that we can do through the entirety of our lifespan. So from my position, my point of view, and from the terms of Ayurveda, we would try and do mild exercises that move towards a spectrum of mildly exertive or non-exertive, things like Tai Chi or yoga, things that can help us gain flexibility, dexterity. In those terms, I would be definitely considerate of. And lastly, what I would say is that half of it's going to be environment, like I changed, like we talked about in the beginning. So if you want to change your physique, if you want to change your muscles, like we said in the beginning, the muscles are responsive to our environment that we live in. You've got to change your environment, and I think that's going to be the bigger thing. And if that means going to the gym, or if that means going to the track, or if that means going to a yoga class, that is really the fastest way of doing it, is change the environment you're in, get away from the desk that you might be working in, and of course utilize those wonderful rasayanas, those wonderful adaptogens that feed the spirit so that we can make these transitions from exercise to habit into health.
And David, wrap it up for us. What keeps you going? You all day long, like the rest of us, you work all day. You just had a brand new baby boy. Congratulations. And you're probably as exhausted as the rest of us, but why are you still in the gym? Why aren't you sitting on the couch with a bowl of popcorn in your lap like Omar and me? What keeps you going?
I think a lot of it is routine. When I look at my son every morning, he's 5 weeks old now. I want to be able to play catch, play sports, do all those things with him well into my later years. I want to be active. I want to stay healthy. I don't necessarily have to perform things to the extreme that I do currently, but these are all things. I've had the luxury of having two great parents that have given me an opportunity to be active my whole life, and in many ways, that team atmosphere, all of the things that go along with it, I've found it to be a benefit, and I would like to pass that on. I'd like to have the opportunity to do those things with my son, and that's part of it. And then I guess, as I said earlier, there is a bit of the ego involved. I want to be fit. I want to look good. I want to be able to do things that maybe the average person cannot. And I don't know. I think in our society currently we gravitate to the fast foods. We gravitate to things that are easy. We gravitate to sitting at home and watching TV, and I kind of enjoy pushing myself and getting outside and being active and doing things a little bit differently. But yeah, it's for so many different reasons. At least, as Omar said, it makes me happy, and I think that's probably the most important part.
Well said. My guest today, David Whalen, competitive athlete, Canadian national educator with our partner Peak Performance Products in Canada. Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and everyone else for being on the call. I definitely appreciate the opportunity.
And Omar Cruz, my brother over in Sugar Land, Texas, our clinical herbalist and national educator for Himalaya. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much again.
All right. Whether you're a store employee, a rep, or a demo person, let us know you joined us today. Email us your information, your store or your company, who you work with, who you work for. Email that to us at iwasthere@himalayausa.com. iwasthere@himalayausa.com. Check in with your name, city and state, feedback, questions, and then you will be registered to win our free fill of all the products we've talked about today. Liver Care, ashwagandha, Chyawanprash, Garcinia, You Need It Balm. Wouldn't it be nice if 3 each of those showed up to your store? You can register to win those at iwasthere@himalayausa.com by sending us your information. We'll see you next month on the Himalaya Hour. That's all the time we have for right now. This is Ryan Reisman. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you good health. Be well, everybody. For right now, this is Ryan Reisman. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you good health. Be well, everybody. For right now, this is Ryan Reisman. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you good health. Be well, everybody. For right now, this is Ryan Reisman. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish